Good evening, I'm Colin Colgan and you're watching the Business and Enterprise Show, Ireland's only live web-based business TV programme with over 2 million views across the world. And as always, we're coming to you live from our state-of-the-art studio in the Cavan Crystal Hotel on the Dublin Road right here in Cavan. My guest tonight has come across from another border county from Louth, from the mill in Drogheda, Brendan Casey. Brendan, you're very welcome.
Nice to hear you.
We're here to talk about a couple of things, the mill and the startup gathering, I should say. But before we talk about either of them, you might tell me a little bit about Brendan Casey.
Well, I suppose I've been the business development manager at the mill Enterprise Hub in Drogheda for the last 18 months, which is when the mill was officially opened. So my own background would be sales and marketing. For the 5 years prior to joining the mill Enterprise Hub, I worked for myself, which is an important aspect because obviously I'm dealing with startups, I'm dealing with people who work for themselves. So I've been there, I've done that. I can see the problems that they have. I can recognise that.
So when a startup is talking to you, he's not talking to either an academic or a civil servant. He's talking to somebody who's been at the coalface, who has knocked on the doors, who has counted the cash coming in.
Yes, so I've had to file my taxes, I've had to do all those issues.
Yeah.
Haven't had to pay anybody, I was always a one-man operation.
Micro enterprise. When no longer one-man bands, we are micro enterprise. I think that's so much classier.
Yes. So after doing that for 5 years, and really, I suppose prior to that, I would have worked quite a bit with Cavan actually, because I managed a cross-border program called Microtrade, where I worked with all at the time, the county enterprise boards in the Republic of Ireland and their equivalent in Northern Ireland, which would be the local enterprise agencies. So I would have worked with all those micro enterprises that you talked about, helping them to target, in the case of companies in the Republic, target Northern Ireland and vice versa as well. So there would have been worked with Intertrade Ireland. There would have been funding for companies making that first step into the overseas market, into the cross-border market. There would have been funding for partnerships, so a company from the south would work with a company from the north. There was trade missions. There was quite a bit of activity, so I managed that program for just over 2 years as well.
Cross-border, it's a strange type of trade. We're based here in Cavan. There are companies that would travel down to Cork if they got a reasonable lead to see could they do some business, but they'd never go down.
Yeah, it's a tricky one because I know, like at the time, Cavan Enterprise Board, would be very proactive. Would have sat on the board, and they would have pushed it a lot. And I think the last time I was actually here in this hotel, it was for a microtrade event. So it's something. There was still, I suppose, a lack of knowledge of each other's marketplace, and I suppose even when I was working for myself, I wrote a lot of market entry plans for companies in the north targeting the south, and there's a lack of familiarity, even with something as simple as media and, I suppose competition. There's just they need a little bit of extra support to get going.
Yeah. And, it's a big market. But we have some sort of fear in tackling it. Now, I suppose the fact that there's a different currency, and the currency in itself can be so volatile.
Yeah.
If you kind of have priced everything in euros and you've converted it to sterling, and 6 months down the road there's a 6 or 7% change in that. If you're working on a low margin product, you can end up making a loss. So I suppose that may put some people, or maybe that might be the only thing people focus on. Look, the exchange rate, I lose money. End of story.
Yeah, I suppose instead of looking at the opportunities, and really, I suppose for micro enterprises, a big part of it is it's sort of the first step into further exporting. So if they can do it, 20 miles up the road, they can do it in Manchester, and then they can move on. So if they get to test it, locally, on a small scale as well. There are always going to be issues. Exporting is not an easy thing to do. Now, and obviously, the Department of Enterprise and Enterprise Ireland are always pushing micro enterprises and all businesses to export because it's I suppose an island, a relatively small economy, so
and before 1992, exporting even through the 20 miles across the border that it would take was a nightmare, you know.
Yeah, and the other thing, Colin, I mean, we were talking earlier on about the internet. There's a lot of people that probably don't even consider themselves exporting, that are sending stuff up the north.
That's right, yeah.
They're sending stuff to UK, and they're dealing with currencies as well.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's ways of minimising that risk, and you still have to build up relationships with customers, etc. So, you know, it can be done, and Northern Ireland is a great place to start. It's a great place.
Right, the mill in Drogheda. What is the mill in Drogheda?
Right, so it's essentially, we do as much as we can to support entrepreneurship in South Louth and East Meath. Drogheda borders the Meath and Louth border. So traditionally, I suppose most people think of Drogheda as being in County Louth, but there's a significant part of it in County Meath, and obviously even just in the, if you want to call it the commuter belt, you know, going from maybe 10 miles.
Where's the border? Is the border the river?
The border is the river, yeah. Even though, actually, even with, it's meant to be the river, but even parts of it on the other side are still in Louth. But I'm originally from Laytown in County Meath, which would be about 7 miles outside Drogheda. And I suppose Drogheda would be our closest town. It's where you go to school, you know, it's where you do your shopping.
Yeah.
But I suppose if you looked at enterprise support based in Laytown, I should be going to Meath Enterprise office, you know. So we've tried to break that down that barrier a little bit, and we've got, you know, entrepreneurs from Meath and Louth based at the mill. We've had support from both local enterprise offices.
Now you have support from the local enterprise offices, but you're not part of the local enterprise office.
They'd sit on our board. The Mill Enterprise Hub is probably unusual in that it took a number of years to get built. As I said, it was built 2 years ago, cost of just over €1 million. We did get we got the land from County Council, from the Louth County Council. We got some funding from Louth County Council and some from Louth County Enterprise Board at the time. But significantly, we got nearly $250,000 from local corporations. So the likes of Coca-Cola, Flowgas, State Street, even some small businesses were giving us a monthly direct debit. So I don't know of any other enterprise centre.
Go back a bit. It was built 2 years ago. Funding was set in place. Go back a year or two before that. Why was the need felt that we should have an independent enterprise independent enterprise hub in Drogheda?
Well, I think we were coming from a low base of entrepreneurship in Drogheda. If you go back to the 70s and 80s, there were quite a few large industrial companies in Drogheda. A lot of those closed down. Probably didn't have the start-up culture that we needed. Drogheda Port, even though it's very strong again now at the moment, there was that industrial slant was there. But we didn't have, I don't think, even though Drogheda Chamber was again one of the oldest chambers, but there was no focal point for entrepreneurship, and that was really the problem. Even though Louth Leo were doing work, and Louth County Council were doing work, if you were setting up a business, you had to come up to Dundalk to go up to see Louth Leo. There was no place where you could work alongside other people and be more than just an office. So even though we give office space, that's only one tiny part of what we do. It's really about creating a community of entrepreneurs so that they can feed off each other, get programs developed. So whether it's female entrepreneurship, whether it's looking at, we've done programs in the agri-food sector, we've done stuff we've created a Drogheda Young Innovators program focusing on transition year students. So there's various things that we want to do and just push the entrepreneurship agenda.
One thing that you said there kind of struck a chord. You create community, because being at one-man band as we used to be, or micro-entrepreneurs as we are now, it can be lonely.
It is, and as I said, I've been there and done that myself, and I worked from home for 5 years, and you'll only get so far. Sometimes you just need to have a helping ear. So everybody who's based at the mill, who we call millers, they can all avail of free mentoring. And that's not true Leo, it's through our board of directors. So it's all voluntary board, experienced business people. so they can avail of mentoring. So we're not about taking rental income, it's about getting them to the next step.
Yeah.
So we have short-term license agreements. They literally sign up for a 3-month license agreement for a hot desk if that's what they're taking, where they get a dedicated space that have all the utilities, broadband access, get mentoring, become part of the network so they can see, if the Leo is offering funding, if there's a networking event. As an entrepreneur, I don't have time to be feeding off all that information, I'm not saying I have got all the time, but a lot of it is fed into me, so I'm the central point. I feed it out to them. I can say, look, maybe you can apply for this type of funding, or Enterprise Ireland are having a specific fund for females or a specific fund for digital media, this is the time to go for it. And that's an important part of it, because
it's true what you say about funding, because there's a lot of funding out there. There's a lot of grants out there, but they're kind of like the third secret of Fatima. I have come across people who have gotten funding, and I'm like, God, where'd you get that from? Say, it was such and such a fund, which I had never heard of. And you speak to other people, and say, no, I hadn't heard about it either. So there is funding out there, but unless somebody can direct you towards it, you may not have no idea that it's there. So I assume it's something like that. That's
it's an important part of it, But even if one of our millers is applying for funding, instead of them having to go and present to Enterprise Ireland or Leo, whatever the case may be, they'll present to us a mock presentation to us. We'll give them feedback. It's in our interest to get them to the next stage. If they can take on 1-2 more employees, that's a success for us. If they move from a single hot desk to a small office, potentially moving out of the mill, in a year or two, that's a success. That's what we're trying to do. So we've a vested interest in making them successful, whereas I suppose another landlord is just caring about taking the rental income in. That's not our priority.
You mentioned the millers, who are your tenants, who are your incubees. I'm not sure what. Well, I suppose they're just millers. They don't have a fuller description. Who are some of your millers, and what do they do?
It's a bit of a mixture. So again, we're probably unusual for an enterprise centre in that we had a couple of objectives when we were set up. We didn't think there was enough foreign direct investment in the Drogheda region, South Louth, East Meath. So we've a couple of foreign direct investment companies.
Now, I stop you there. The foreign, that's in other words, that's an American or international company. How did you attract them? Because the competition for FDI in Ireland, everyone complains that they don't go further than Dublin, Limerick, Cork, Galway. It's because it's every TD would love to have one in their constituency, but as a rule, the companies go for the big cities, and the smaller towns they're not interested in. So how did you attract
well, I think it's
FDI into Drogheda?
I think it's a little bit different now in that the IDA does have a specialised emergent division where they're actually targeting smaller companies. So they might be targeting a company in France that might only have 20, 30, 50 employees to set up an office in Ireland. So really what they need is a bit of flexibility. So we're not trying to tie them down for a 5-year lease or anything like that. We want to give them the flexibility that they can come in with the 10 employees, grow to 20 or whatever the case may be, and then move on to get their own premises somewhere else. We have, I suppose, between the board of directors, we have people from the local enterprise office, from the county council, from Dundalk IT, from other institutes, from the chamber. So straight away they're in the right network. And that's an important part of it. So we don't have a lot of foreign direct investments, but I mean, it's an important part of what we do. Basically, we're a stepping stone. So they can come in, they don't have to spend 6 months fitting out, a 10,000 square foot premises when they might only need 1,000 square feet. So this is a quick option. You get them in. I won't say they're embedded in Drogheda, but they're in Drogheda, and hopefully they'll grow and they'll stay in Drogheda as they expand. So it's an important part of it. But equally, we obviously have a strong focus on micro enterprises, on startups. So the guys who are moving from a home office, as I said, to a hot desk, are the guys that need, small offices, 2 or 3 people. they'd be the majority of the companies there.
Yeah.
So it's a one
What's
or
the
2 man
advantages
operation.
of a hot desk over a home
Yeah.
office?
Well, it's a massive issue for them. As I said, if you're working from yourself, first of all, you're not part of that community, so you're not meeting people, over coffee and sort of say, oh, this is what I did in marketing, or this is what my accountant told me, or whatever the case may be.
You're sending emails in your jammies.
Yes, well, but it's just, for instance, we'd have brown bag lunches once a month where all the millers would come together, we'd literally just have lunch together. Sometimes we might have a guest speaker in, sometimes one of the millers will give a 15-minute presentation on what they do, so it could be, top 10 social media tips, it could be accountancy advice, it could be whatever. So you're feeding off each other, and that's an important part of it. But the advantage for a micro-enterprise of having a hot desk, it's a low cost, it's €150 plus VAT per month. That includes a dedicated desk, all their broadband, all their utilities, free mentoring, as I said, from our board of directors. It's a 3-month license agreement. If it doesn't work out for them, they move on. They're part of that support network, and that's the important part of it. We're not.
Is it mainly technology and technology-related type company, or do you have what we're going to
It's a bit
describe
of
as
a-
traditional businesses?
There's probably a technology slant, but then we have other people, like we've engineers, we've food consultants, we've videographers, design companies, training companies. The criteria you're really looking at, Colin, is can we help them go to the next stage. So no, we don't have manufacturing, we don't have retail. It's pure office facilities. There's no light manufacturing, anything like that. We have to be able to help them.
How do people find out about you?
Well, at this stage, I suppose we've been very proactive in local events. We had a series of events, for instance, called Innovate Drogheda. Earlier on, I was talking about the fact that there's been a sea change in the industry in Drogheda. So we picked 4 sectors that had traditionally been very strong in Drogheda. For example, engineering. There used to be 1,000 people working in engineering, shipbuilding in Drogheda Port. That's long gone, but there's other engineering firms taking their place. So we pushed that. So we had Cisco Engineering talking about how they've been in Drogheda for the last 40 years, how they had to innovate. So even though we don't have the 1,000-person engineering firm, there's 5 or 6 other smaller guys that have had to innovate, and they've stayed relevant. So it's an important part, and we want to say, look, Drogheda has been doing this for 200-300 years. We have to keep on doing it. The mill is there to help them, to do that. If somebody wants to set up in Drogheda, the support structure is there now. The advice is there, the signposting is there, the mentoring is there. So all that type
So
of
you
activity.
sell yourself, which
we
I suppose
do.
in itself,
Yeah.
it helps your millers say, well, like if they have to sell themselves, well, I have to sell myself, because a lot of entrepreneurs come up with brilliant ideas, but do not have the ability, I don't think they have the ability to go out and sell it.
Yeah, well, selling is probably the biggest issue, for micro enterprises. They have the idea, sometimes they spend too long on it without getting out there, meeting potential customers, working on it as soon as possible. You could have a brilliant engineer, I suppose, traditionally, or a brilliant IT person that just can't pick up the phone.
Yeah.
If you don't sell, you're out of business.
Out of business.
So
Now, last week or so, you were the kind of northeast hub of the startup gathering.
that's right, yeah. So the startup gathering, it's the first year of the startup gathering. There was 400 events across the country from October the 5th to 9th. We had about, I think, just over 20 events in the northeast, which would have been Loudmead, Cavan, Monaghan. Some very strong events as well. The aims of the startup gathering, I suppose there was three main aims of the startup gathering, was to develop more entrepreneurs. So get more in the pipeline, more entrepreneurs, a little bit of a numbers game. The more people that recognise they can set up business, the more of them will be successful. They also wanted to develop hubs or clusters. So if you're in Galway, where there's a medtech cluster, they want to push that. So one of the things for the northeast is trying to develop clusters. So that is an important aspect of it. And then the final part of the startup gathering was really to push it, I suppose, across the globe, that Ireland is a place for startups. And that goes back to what I talked about earlier on in relation to the IDA, that they are actually targeting, small startups now. It's not, when Facebook set up in Dublin, I think again they only had maybe 500 people in the States, which is a relatively small startup. It's not going for the guys with 10, they're still going for the guys with 10, 100,000. But they recognise, it's a different paradigm now, I suppose, in relation to the startup, and people are growing so quickly that if they get somebody, from California or from Germany that might only have 100 employees, get them into Ireland, get them to expand, within a relatively short space of time, they could be like Google with 3,000 employees, etc. So,
the Connect Ireland, is that tied in with that as well, the whole idea?
Well, that was tied in a bit with Startup Gathering, yes. Essentially, they would have shouted out globally, that Connect Ireland essentially is trying to use Irish connections, so that if you know somebody, again in Australia, whether they have an Irish connection or whether they're looking to expand into Europe, that if you can bring them to Cavan or Drogheda, the person who actually suggests that they come over here and puts them in contact with Connect Ireland will get paid a fee. So I think at the moment it's €1,500
per job. Yeah.
And it's great.
And
and
in fact, I was chatting to somebody down in Kells.
Yeah, Kells. Yeah,
Hugh Morris.
That's right,
he picked up fees of 150,000.
Yeah. I think Kells is sort of the success story of Connect Ireland, and that's an important part of it, because if you have, like in every town in Ireland, there's people who really want to push, enterprise, and if you really sort of churn through your networks, and if you're talking to somebody, and I think in Connect Ireland's case, there's people who've been on holidays, and somebody says, "Oh yeah, we've been looking at Ireland now. We're thinking of entering Europe." And it's literally picking up a phone, Connect Ireland and IDA
and
do the
of course
rest.
the Irish in America are quite influential. They're kind of high up in a lot of big corporations.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think especially, I suppose, trying to get it into some of the smaller towns, it needs a little bit of extra selling. So sometimes people will have an extra connection to a particular area.
It might be just that little bit to instead of going to Dublin, they'll come out to...
If you go to New York, I won't say half the pubs are owned by Cavan people, but there's a lot of Cavan people
at least
over
a quarter of them.
So it's part of that is, trying to get them to look back to their home county.
Yeah. So overall, the startup, was it a success this year?
I think
was there any concrete achievements from it?
Well, I think it's still too early. I think it's considered a success at this stage. The initial target was about 200 events, certain number of attendees. So all those sort of initial targets have been surpassed. And the initial focus was going to be on 5 cities, and that changed. So the likes of myself coordinating the Northeast, there was a Northwest coordinator. That was something that was added afterwards. Yeah. So I think that will all be evaluated, over the course of the year, because you can't just focus on 5 cities,
No.
And it's an important part, even for the Northeast. I suppose if you looked at the 4 counties, Louth, Meath, Cavan, Monaghan, I sat in on border region action plans, and that's something that Enterprise Ireland are pushing, that they don't want, Drogheda and Dundalk competing against each other, or Monaghan or Cavan, that there's greater strength in numbers, I suppose. Now, there's always going to be a competitive angle, but if we can do something, collectively, it's going to be much more successful. So, for instance, as part of the Startup Gathering, the Northeast Plato Group is launched. That's got the 4 counties, Cavan, Louth, Meath, Monaghan, working together on the Plato program. So that's a great program, I suppose, where micro enterprises are matched with larger parent companies, whether they're foreign direct investment or multinationals, or even just large indigenous firms. Somebody who's been there, done that can actually advise the same group of 12 or 15 micro enterprises on a monthly basis. So that's a good example of the 4 counties working together.
And that was launched.
That was launched during the startup gathering. I suppose locally in Meath and Louth, we had 4 chambers of commerce coming together, And again, that's important, so we had...
How did that, coming together as in merging or just
No.
No,
Not that ambitious. But a lot of times, I'd sit on Drogheda Chamber of Commerce, and sometimes they'll do joint events with one other chamber. But in this instance, we got Drogheda, Dundalk, Navan, Kells Chamber to put together one single event. So we had Alex Cunningham of Slane Castle, Slane Whiskey. He gave a guest presentation.
Was there samples?
No.
Right.
I think it's still a little bit early for that. It was a bit early in the day. But he gave a great presentation. But more importantly, we had an entrepreneur from each of the chambers. So after Alex Cunningham gave his talk, we had 4 different entrepreneurs, one from each of the councils, or one from each of the chambers of commerce.
Yeah.
And we sort of looked at what worked in the northeast, what didn't, what worked better in Kells, what worked better in Drogheda.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of feeding off that. And a lot of times we talked about Northern Ireland, but even if you're in Drogheda, you might not be doing business in Dundalk or in Kells or in Navan, and it works both ways.
Yeah.
So there's a job there that, sometimes you don't look at your nearest neighbours.
Mentioning the Chamber of Commerce there, just a thought just struck me. We have the Leos, we have the Chamber of Commerce, we have the Enterprise Centres. Are they only starting to all work together now? Because let's be honest, Chamber of Commerce has more or less the same goals and aims as the Leos, who in turn will have the same goals and aims for innovation centres like the Mill, but not necessarily working together.
Yeah. In the past, I suppose as somebody involved in enterprise support, if you're a small business person, you don't really care where the support is coming from, whether it's from the chamber, whether it's from the council, whether it's from local enterprise office. As long as you know what's available, when it's available. So I think there has been a move in the past couple of years from the Department of Enterprise. So you've seen the county enterprise boards changing over to local enterprise offices, merging in, I suppose, working within the local county councils. So that has been that merger, so that there's not. I suppose
that a good
at the
idea?
same time. It's still
most,
early days.
Most of the enterprise boards, if you'll pardon the pun, were quite entrepreneurial. The same can not often be said about councils. And kind of to bring the enterprise board in under the influence of the council, would that not affect the entrepreneurial spirit of some boards?
To be blunt, it varies. As I said, I worked with all the enterprise boards, and the quality varies. And trying to, in general, they were very good, but the quality did vary.
Yeah.
So I think they're trying to make it uniform across the country, which is it's a good aim to have. I think there was certain duplication. So when it comes to planning permission, office requirements, the councils are usually influential on that.
Yeah.
So it made sense for the local
board,
enterprise.
and then in the council, you also had an enterprise officer.
So there was certain overlapping. So they've come together, but I can see it now. Any application we make for funding, always ask, well, what other parties are involved. So there's a distinct wish. So that there's a mixture of public and private, so that you might be getting private sponsorship, but also that you'll be working with the likes of organisations, whether the Chamber of Commerce, whether a Plato Group, whether it's the local college, so they want other groups working together. So minimising that duplication. So definitely in the last year, you can see that value for money is a priority for the Department of Enterprise. So it's making that transition, and I think it is working. And I suppose the Mill is a good example, in that we've got support from the local enterprise office. We've got support from the college, representing the board. We've got support from the council. We've got support from private sector funding, purely on a voluntary and on a donation basis. But I think that's the model that they're aiming towards. So that has been quite successful.
Mill is up in operation for 18 months. What's the plan for the future?
Well, at this stage, we're ahead of expectations in that we're fully occupied. We've actually been fully occupied about 4 or 5 months at this stage. So apart from the office space, working with the existing mentors, there's various other programs that we've been involved in. We just, Monday we had the first session of an Illuminate program, which again is a good example of various organisations working together. So that's a specific program for female entrepreneurs. We've sort of loosely termed it M1 Boyne Valley. So we've got female entrepreneurs from Dundalk, Navan, right up to Fingal, working with the Ryan Academy in DCU Ryan Academy, who specialise in female entrepreneurship. So that sort of came about through our partnership with Dundalk IT, who have a memorandum of understanding with Ryan Academy. Locally, it's been sponsored by Coca-Cola and AIB, but really, and also by the Mead and Laird local enterprise offices. It's based in the Mill. So that's an example of the type of programs that we want to deliver. In the past, somebody from South Laird, East Mead, Dundalk, even Fingal County Council would have had to go up to City West to get that quality.
Yeah.
You know, it's a sort of level 6 accredited course with some of the best tutors in Ireland. So delivering that locally is an important part of what we're doing. Developing more programs, I suppose, as part of the startup gathering, we had an e-payments conference in City North Hotel, which focused on the opportunities for, I suppose, the fintech industry, for the, you know, for the payment side of things. So one of our big Miller tenants is Yapstone, an American e-payments firm. You have PayPal in Dundalk, you have Vesta in Dundalk. So we see, going back to that, I suppose, cluster aspect, we see a big opportunity to go from the IFSC up to Dublin Airport, right up the M1, and benefit everybody in the region.
Yeah.
Again, as part of the startup gathering, there was the launch of the Boyne Valley Food Hub, which again, you know, it's trying to get away from focusing on one particular town and focus on hubs or clusters that can actually benefit a wider region. So some of those programs and some of those clusters would be a priority in the next phase. But I suppose from a bricks and mortar point of view, we've literally just signed off on a design for phase 2. So there was always going to be a phase 2 of the mill. We just didn't have enough money in the first instance. So the plans were always there. We've got most of the funding at this stage, but we'll be building by January, roughly doubling up the size, getting more entrepreneurs.
Where did the money come from?
It's a little bit of a mixture. We still had some money from the Enterprise Ireland that we didn't spend in the first phase because that was based, Enterprise Ireland funding is based on 33%. They'll contribute 33%.
Yeah.
So we still had some money from Enterprise Ireland, we've some money from Laird County Council, we've some money from a rural economic development zone. We'll be taking a loan, and then we'll also be getting private sector support.
Now,
so
private sector support, in other words, companies paying either a subscription or donation. What's in it for them? Just pure
philanthropic donations, yes.
Yeah.
And this is not just the large companies in Drogheda. I mean, I mentioned some of the large companies, but we also had small local business people, you know, 5-man operations, contributed a certain amount over 2 years, and it just shows the dedication, I suppose, and you know, the willingness of people to step up to the mark. And again, you know, that's, I suppose, like any entrepreneur that was sort of said, look, we have to do it ourselves. Yeah, they're going to avail of support from other organisations, which we couldn't have done it without. But the fact that people stepped up, put the money in their pocket, literally, you know, some of them, obviously quite a few of them, anonymously. So it was really just to push it and sort of recognise, like, Drogheda, as I said earlier, you know, has a very strong tradition of industry and innovation, but it sort of needed a bit of a kickstart to stay going.
And you were there.
No, and I think it's been very successful to date. You know, as I said, we're fully occupied. We've got a number of programs operating. You know, we're ready for the next phase of it, so looking forward to it.
The politicians tell us that there's a lift about. Are you feeling it in Drogheda?
We are, in that, you know, even if you looked at the hot desks, you know, people who came in with one person literally by themselves, a lot of them are taking on a second person, you know, sometimes through schemes, whether it's Job Bridge, sometimes through student placement, sometimes through direct employment, but they are taking on people.
Yeah,
you know,
slowly but surely they're expanding.
Oh no, they are definitely. You know, it's one of the reasons we've been fully occupied, and it's one of the reasons we have to push for the next phase.
Yeah.
So you are seeing, and that's, you know, where, you know, the towns, I suppose, outside of the cities, that's where it is. You know, people taking on 1 or 2 extra people, you know, building up from a 5-person operation to a 10-person operation, getting that type of level of enterprise on the ground. That's where you'll see a benefit for everybody. They're shopping locally, they're living locally, they're working locally, and that's what we want. You know? Yeah.
So I think it was Late Show used to have the ad that started on Late Show. So I'm sure you'll be looking at businesses that are a huge success in a couple of years and say that started in the mill. So Brendan Casey of the mill, thank you so much for your time coming in and telling us of the work of the mill and more recently of the startup gathering. So that's it for tonight's programme. I've been Colm Colgan. You've been watching the Business and Enterprise Show. Good night.